What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the Sleeper Simulant, which just recently received its full buff it was intended to get at the beginning of the season, which was roughly 16%. And in this video, we will first be breaking down all the DPS numbers and total damage output numbers of the Sleeper itself, then comparing it to some other top options in the game. And before we begin, my code AIR is 30% off for G Fuel through tomorrow, which is the 26th. The link to their store will be in the comments in the description. And if you want to try someone out, I definitely recommend picking up the flavor called the Juice. It is by far my favorite right now. So let's go begin with the Sleeper. Looking at the damage on Carl, one thing worth noting is its crit isn't that high compared to most linear fusion rifles, which is a good thing because if you do miss a crit, as long as you still hit the body, you're not really missing out on too much damage. The one thing about Sleeper that used to be really good were the bounces, and those are extremely bad now. As you see, you could potentially hit 5 bounces per shot, but it only does 770 per bounce, so that's not something you should be going for. That's obviously way less than just hitting them with the beam itself. So the only time a bounce will come into effect is if it goes through the target and comes back and hits them like a few times, but obviously that's not going to add that much damage to your actual shot itself. And for all the DPS numbers, we'll be using the catalyst, which will increase the rate of fire. So look at that. First, just the 1 mag, so 3 shots. That's going to take 3.353 seconds, which means DPS is 63,000, which is honestly pretty good. Not quite up there with some of the top burst options, but pretty good overall. And now we look at if you have to reload multiple times, so 2 mags and also 3 mags at the same time. Once again, the first mag taking that 3.3 seconds. Now with max reload speed, 2 will take roughly 8 seconds, and for 3 mags, it's going to take roughly 12.763 seconds, which means DPS falls down to 52,000, then almost 50,000 for 3 mags, so it's going to hover roughly around that 50,000 number for its entire reserves. The Sleeper also holds 13 ammo, as you'll see right here, with no reserve perks, means almost a million total damage, 917,000, which is quite a lot for a single weapon, so pretty good so far. So as we mentioned, its burst DPS isn't as high as some of the other options in the game. Let's go ahead and compare it to some other ranged heavy weapons, because that is kind of the use of Sleeper. And the easiest place to start will be just other linear fusion rifles. So for example, the Threaded Needle. The important perk on this will be Vorpal, which will be a 15% increase, and I also have major spec on it because Carl is a major. And I've made a few videos on this fusion last season and also this season, so I'm going to be breaking down every single number I've already covered. But just looking at the damage on Carl, one thing to note about regular fusions is their crit is much higher than that of the Sleeper, so if you miss your crit, you're going to be losing a lot of damage with this compared to Sleeper. And for this video, I'm just going to be shooting 5 shots both times. I do have Clown Cartridge, which will help with the sustained DPS. But for the point of this video, just one reload with 5 both times takes 10.5 seconds. So the DPS of the Needle, 1 mag is 56,000, then for 2 mags just under 50,000. So the Sleeper had a little bit higher burst over the first magazine, but once you get to the second and third magazine, they're pretty close. But the main difference is the Thread Needle holds 20 ammo, which means a total damage output of over 1 million. So overall, it seems like the Sleeper is going to be a little bit better for burst, while the Thread Needle will be better for longer boss fights, for example raid bosses, while something like Sleeper might be better for strike bosses or raid bosses that have a shorter damage phase. But both their numbers are extremely close, so it's not going to be a huge edge either way. Then moving on to exotic heavy snipers, there's 2 in the game, Darcy then Whisper the Worm. I'm going to go ahead and use Whisper the Worm in this video because it's usually a little bit better than that of Darcy for both DPS and total damage output. So I'm going to damage on Carl with that. It's going to hit for 40,929. And looking at rate of fire, I'm assuming that you can already have Whisper breathing before you start shooting at the boss, which is the case for a lot of bosses in the game. You can already be scoped in while waiting. Looking at that, the 1 mag and 2 mag at the same time. 2 mag takes just under 4 seconds, which means DPS of 1 mag is 77.5 thousand, and 2 mags it'll drop down to 61.5, and pretty much will hover around there forever as long as you don't miss. This weapon also holds 18 ammo with no reserves, which means 736,000 total damage output, which is a little bit lower than that of the 2 linear fusion rifles. Next up will be the Xenophage, which unlike the previous weapons, which are all crit based, this is the first one that is very clearly not a crit based weapon, hitting 22,000 on Carl. Looking rate of fire of just 1 mag this time, so 13 shots. It's going to take just under 6 seconds, which means DPS of Xeno is roughly 48.1 thousand, which is a little bit lower than that of the previous DPS numbers of the weapons we tested so far. This weapon also holds 28 ammo, which will result in 621,000 total damage output, which once again is the lowest so far. Xeno is mostly only good on bosses that don't really have a crit or extremely hard to hit crits. Now moving on to rocket launchers, there's gonna be two I want to look at: an Overflow Heathens with Vorpal, then also the Deathbringer, and both these weapons are pretty similar for their DPS numbers. They achieve those numbers very differently. So just looking at the Overflow Heathens, one rocket hits for these two numbers right here, which is roughly 90,000. And just like the Thread Needle, I made multiple videos going over overflow combos, so just keeping it simple for this video, just starting off with two, then reloading and shooting another one. Looking at that, that's going to take roughly 3.4 seconds. So DPS of just the first two shots is really high at 167,000. Then over the three shots, it drops down to 80,000. So depending on what you're doing, rocket DPS is all over the place, but generally the burst DPS is roughly 80 to 90,000. Then for the sustained DPS, the more you have to reload, it'll fall off, and eventually it'll get pretty close to the other weapons we showed off in this video in like the upper 50s, lower 60s. So rockets are extremely heavy burst DPS weapons. This rocket also holds 7 with no reserve perks, which means 634,000, which is definitely on the lower side of the things we tested so far. And now moving on from the heavy slot, but sticking with ranged weapons, we have the Predator's Revenge. I'm using this sniper out of all the different options because 140s are the highest DPS, 90s are also pretty good too. Looking at the damage on Carl with Frenzy, it's going to hit for 19.5 thousand. Now looking at the rate of fire, 1 mag and 2 mag at the same time. Once again, ignoring rewind rounds, just doing 7 shots, then 7 shots again. 2 mags takes 7 seconds, which means DPS over 1 is 52.4 thousand. It falls off to under 39,000 for 2 mags. So kind of like rockets, pretty high burst, but falls off once you have to reload at least once. This weapon also holds 23 ammo, which means total damage output is by far the lowest, which isn't too surprising because it is a special weapon. But the thing about this is you can obviously pair it with Anarchy, but the thing is Anarchy is being changed soon. We don't quite know exactly what's going to happen yet, so all we can go off of right now is what it does currently, which is it adds roughly 20,000 DPS to any combo. That obviously increases the total damage output by a lot. So if you combo that with the Predator's Revenge, the 1 mag is now 72.8 and 2 mags is just under 60,000. So those numbers are obviously a lot closer to some of the things we tested so far. And the final thing I want to test, which is not range based, will be Slug shotguns because they are pretty much the meta right now. And I've shown off these numbers a lot of times throughout the season. So one single slug DPS is 60,000 plus Anarchy would be 81,000. So those are obviously extremely good for a special weapon. Then with double slug, the DPS is 95,000. Then with Anarchy, 116,000. So obviously that is extremely high. Pretty much the only thing beating that for burst would be rockets. But as you see, double slug plus Anarchy total damage output is extremely high. But these numbers could change drastically in the upcoming seasons because of not only the Anarchy nerf, but also seems like they plan on doing something to double slugs in the future also. So overall, how good is the Sleeper Simulant? Honestly, I think it's pretty good now overall. Its DPS numbers are pretty much on par with a lot of other top options in the game. The only things that really destroy it are rocket launchers and also slugs, but those two things will pretty much destroy anything in the game. And rockets are pretty much only for burst. Then as you have to reload more and more, they kind of fall back into the same level field as most of the other things in the game. But then on the other hand, double slugs are just way better for burst, sustained DPS, and also total damage output. But obviously there's a lot of factors in that combo that will be changing in the near future. So we'll have to see once those go through how far they fall down. But obviously right now those are still the king. I think rockets are still the best for burst DPS. But then for sustained DPS and total damage output, Sleeper's right in there with a lot of other top options in the game. So honestly, it really isn't that bad. Now, do I think it's the meta weapon? Obviously not. But you don't always have to use the best of the best at all times in Destiny, so I definitely think it has a place. And if you want to throw it on, you'll definitely get the job done. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for the video. Once again, my code AIR is 30% off through the 26th, which is tomorrow. So definitely take advantage of that. Link will be down below. If you ever want to support me above just watching my videos, that is pretty much the best way to do so. Anyways, the rest of the video will just be a little bit of straight gameplay. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.